My husband and I have a 21-year-old daughter and 26-year-old son together. When my husband and I got married, he had a 1-year-old daughter at the time, who is now 27. Long story short, my daughter had been very sick and needed a kidney transplant. We did not want her to have to deal with uncertainty of some wait list. My stepdaughter was around because she was taking a break from booking acting jobs, and we found out she was a match. After seeing how her half-sister could barely stand up, my stepdaughter said, against her mother's objections, that she'd do it. So, the transplant was successful, and now my daughter has become the happy, vibrant, and hopeful young woman that she had been before she was in so much pain. My husband and I were in tears, and told my stepdaughter how eternally grateful we were to her sacrifice and kind heart, and she said she did it for her half-sister. My husband and I paid for her transportation to the hospital. We had a caregiver for our daughter when she came home, that also tended to her half-sister. A week after coming home, my stepdaughter's boyfriend picked her up and drove her back to Los Angeles, where she takes office administrator temp jobs. This was a couple months ago, and now she's calling my husband and I up, saying that she's on the brink of being fired from the temp agency she belongs to, because she can't go to work. She says when she got back to LA, she's been feeling pain, numbness, and stomach problems. She says the doctor said they are worried about her blood pressure. She asked that we work out something with her that ties her over until she could work like she could before this donation. I reminded my stepdaughter that she was made aware during the process that the donor is responsible for her own lost wages and travel expenses, but we decided to go outside what was legally required of us and paid for her transportation to the hospital, and would have paid for her transportation back if her boyfriend didn't want to pick her up. We were on speaker, and my husband said that acting jobs have been drying up anyway, and asked what she would have rationalized for asking us for money had she not donated the kidney, which she said was out of a genuine concern for her sister. We both told her that we would not be giving her any financial support. Now my husband's ex, who is unemployed, is calling us clinical and cold. My daughter is also mad and offered to let us cut off her allowance for her half-sister. I told her this was our decision, and we wanted her to keep her allowance and to focus on getting back to college. Am I the a-hole? You're the a-hole. So your 21-year-old adult daughter, who you describe happy, vibrant, and hopeful, gets an allowance from you, despite being a grown adult woman. And your 27-year-old stepdaughter who saved your daughter's life can go duck herself, right? She's having long-term complications as a direct result of saving your daughter's life. Your daughter thinks she should offer stepdaughter support, and your attitude is still duck her. Jesus, you're an a-hole. You're the a-hole. Yes, the donor would be responsible if it wasn't your husband's daughter. This is his child who generously donated her kidney, has seemingly paid her own way for many years, and is now suffering from complications from her gift. And all you were concerned about is what was legally required, based on donation. You are clinical and cold to this child, while still giving a 21-year-old an allowance. Is she not capable of getting a job? You're the a-hole. Your stepdaughter put her life and health at risk in order to save your daughter's life, and you're not willing to provide her with any financial support until she fully recovers? Sure, you're not legally responsible, but morally, how do you justify not helping her out? I, 33 female, have 4 siblings. H, male 35. G, 30 female. L, 26 female. And Maggie, 39 female. This story concerns myself and Maggie. Maggie is our mother's daughter from a previous relationship. Basically, Mom and John were in a relationship for 2 years and had Maggie before the relationship ended. We all lived in the same city for a while, and when we did, Maggie went between our mom's home and her dad's home, but lived primarily with her dad. Occasionally, Mom's career had us moving to some really cool places, and other than 3 places, Maggie went with us. When we were finally back in New York, our mom and dad decided to buy a house in Connecticut, and we moved up there. Maggie stayed in New York with her dad. Then we moved to Los Angeles, and Maggie stayed in New York with her dad. For a long time, we only saw Maggie on weekends and holidays. All of our other siblings are pretty close to Maggie, but she and I have always had a hard time getting along. The thing about Maggie is that everything she does, she has major success. She's gorgeous. She's an actual genius. She's funny. Maggie was a child prodigy who skipped 3 grades and graduated from high school at 15 years old. Then went to 2 major universities and got a doctorate at a young age, and met her husband and got married and had twins at a young age, all while managing a successful career. Maggie is like King Midas. Everything she touches turns to gold. She's been incredibly fortunate in her life. She's been married for a long time, and they still act like newlyweds. Meanwhile, I've been through several relationships before meeting my new husband, and my career is steady, but still hasn't taken off. I guess you could say I'm a little jealous of Maggie. My husband and I had a small wedding at my parents' home. We invited only immediate family and some very close friends. My husband and my brothers are good friends, and my brother was a groomsman. I asked my two younger sisters and my best friend to be my bridesmaids. I didn't ask Maggie. Maggie helped with wedding planning, and she never let on that she was hurt by my decision. At the wedding, I overheard one of my dad's relatives ask Maggie why she wasn't in the wedding, and Maggie answered very graciously that she thought she would be more helpful in a planning role. My mom told me a couple days ago that Maggie confided in her that she was very hurt that I excluded her from the wedding. She said Maggie has never understood why I don't like her. I will admit that Maggie tried to be my friend for a long time, but I've just never felt much of a connection to her. I told Mom I never meant to hurt Maggie, but I wasn't going to have someone I wasn't close to in my wedding party. Maggie hasn't spoken to me about any of this, but my mom and dad have both told me I could have used the wedding to bridge the gap between my sister and myself, and all I've served to do is further the gap. Was I in the wrong here? Edit. My mother and father didn't outright call me an a-hole, but the way my mother told me that my sister was hurt and thinks I don't like her made it very clear that Mom thinks I'm one. Mom says having our other sisters and our brother in the wedding, but excluding one sibling was cold and rude and unfeeling. She said it was even worse that I had someone who isn't related to us in the wedding, and it was sort of glaring that Maggie was excluded. Apparently, several relatives have asked Mom and Dad about it. I'm going with you're the a-hole, not necessarily for not having Maggie be a bridesmaid, but rather for these 6 words of attempted self-deception. I never meant to hurt Maggie. That being said, the fact that you took advantage of Maggie's helpfulness in planning the wedding, but didn't acknowledge her efforts by making her part of your bridal party, when your other 2 sisters and a non-related friend were, is, well, not a good look. Anyway, you not wanting to hurt Maggie, I don't believe you. I believe this was a way for you to subtly hurt Maggie, and that you succeeded in hurting her, and now you refuse to own up to the actions you took and the results therefrom. Perhaps it rubbed you the wrong way how graciously Maggie handled her upset at your wedding. Perhaps you were on some level gratified to hear from your mother that Maggie was indeed upset. Perhaps not. In any event, I think you're fooling yourself to say it wasn't your intention. I also feel like Mom is an a-hole, and maybe the biggest one here, for betraying Maggie's confidence. Unless, of course, Maggie greenlit Mom telling you. But my read is, Maggie didn't want you to know she was upset, and she was just venting to her mom. If that's the case, Mom is also the a-hole for stirring the pot. You're the a-hole. You felt close enough to get her to help in planning the wedding, but not close enough to let her stand near you in a matching dress with your other sisters. You straight up used her, and are lying to yourself about it. So, Maggie is good enough to help plan the wedding, but not be a participant. That, in your jealousy, makes you the a-hole. I feel for Maggie. My oldest son, 24, is not my wife's biological child, and is my child with my late wife. My late wife and I bought a 3-bedroom house when we got married. When I remarried, my current wife moved into this house with me, but I never put her name on the deed. The house was only in my name. My wife and I ended up having several children and needing to move into a bigger house. When we bought our new home, she wanted me to sell the old one. I said no, that this home was something my late wife and I purchased with the hope of one day passing it on to our son. I would make it a rental property instead. That was one of the biggest fights we ever had. She insisted we compromise, but I refused to do so. When my son graduated from college, I put his name on the deed to the house with mine, which was another fight, but I felt he was the appropriate inheritor to his mother's share. I didn't share any of the rental income with him though, as I was still paying all the taxes and insurance. At this point, the mortgage was paid off. I net over $2,000 a month from this house, which goes into the household budget. My son just got engaged and wants to move into the house after he marries his fiancée. He suggested he pay half rent and eventually buy out my share of the house. I told my son I agreed to his plan of saving up to buy out my share, but instead of paying rent, he should just take over the taxes and insurance. We agreed to this. My wife is livid and says I'm a massive a-hole for dramatically decreasing our household income without consulting her. She likened my decision to financial aggression. I suggested we downsize to a smaller house now that our oldest 2 kids are leaving the nest, and we can rent out the larger one and be in the same situation as before, owning 2 homes and getting rental income from one. She called me a selfish jerk and won't speak to me now. Am I the a-hole? Not the a-hole. Your son's name is on the title. You have zero right to charge him any form of rent. He is an equal owner to you at this point. His paying the taxes and insurance is reasonable since he is using the home as a primary residence. But he is an actual owner, and thus has an equal right to use of the property. Frankly, he should have been getting half of the rental income as soon as his name was on the property. Payment for you denying him use of what was now joint property. But what's done is done. Your wife is mad because the household is losing the rental income. But honestly, tough crap. It sure as hell isn't financial aggression. And I suspect she's just angry because you dared to give a crap about your son when he's not one of her children. Not the a-hole, your wife is. She's trying to seize property from your son, even though he is the rightful inheritor. She wouldn't do this if it were her biological child. Needless to say, your wife doesn't care for him. Also, you clearly stated that you already own a large house, and since your kids are moving out, you can move and rent out that house, which will probably bring in more profit. You're being reasonable while she is acting selfish. Not the a-hole. It's not your wife's house. It never was. She seems to have some misplaced entitlement. This isn't financial aggression. Not even close. While I agree that couples should come to a mutual decision on financial matters, she should have stayed clear of this one. All of your reasoning for doing what you did was right and just. If anyone is being aggressive, it's her. You can tell her that silence is an aggressive form of manipulation. She sounds incredibly selfish, to be honest. I, 28 male, dated my wife, 26 female, for 3 years before we got married, a year and a half ago. I'm a white guy, and she's an Indian who moved to the States for college and settled with a job here. She made it clear to me sometime in our relationship that her family was not going to approve of her marrying outside of her religion, caste, and race, but we both decided to go for it regardless. We didn't have much money at the time either, so we eloped, and had a sweet ceremony with only our closest friends in attendance. Her parents didn't even know she was dating me at the time. Over the course of our relationship, she has gotten to know my family and friends incredibly well. My sisters treat her like a sister, and my parents love her, plus she is basically as close to my friends as me. However, despite the fact that I know she has very close ties to family and friends back in India, I have never met them, and I truly don't think I come close to understanding her culture or experiencing her traditions, which I think is important because we've decided to try for kids this year and want to raise them as proud of both identities. 6 months ago, she finally told her parents about me. Not about us being married, but about her dating a white guy. Recently, they have finally started to come around a bit, and I decided it was probably high time I visit her home, her family, and her country. I brought this up with her, and she was initially quite hesitant about the idea. However, last night, she sat me down and told me she is willing to take the trip, but it would require 2 things from me. For us to act as if we are not currently married, and to be willing to have a big wedding celebration likely back in India fairly soon, because she said things will move fast once I meet her parents. To clarify, she said we would not bear the financial burden, even though we were both quite well-to-do now. I told her I didn't want to lie to them about our lives, and that it is probably better to simply tell them the truth and come clean. I also don't want to have another wedding ceremony when we already had one over a year ago that, to me, was absolutely perfect, and I would be very uncomfortable with the same. She broke down at this and told me she can't keep this secret from her parents any longer, and that I was being an a-hole for not understanding the fact that she doesn't have a choice in this, and it is the only way for our relationship to work. I don't think I was unfair not wanting to deceive my in-laws, but maybe I misunderstood something. So, am I the a-hole? It's not even remarrying. It's just having another celebration so that her family can be involved. I think this is a weird hill to die on. I can understand not wanting to lie, but like you said, you don't understand her culture as well as you'd like to. No a-holes. Culture and familiar pressure can be quite a burden for one to carry, and she may even want a very large and traditional Indian wedding. Should you go through with this, it will be an amazing experience. I'm a white guy and have been fortunate to be included in portions of a traditional wedding. Insane, and an amazing cultural experience. This type of wedding may be critical for her parents to accept the white guy. I also believe she needs to be more honest with her parents, and I also understand why it would be very, very hard. I don't think everyone stinks, and understand how difficult this is for everyone. No a-holes. You also need to accept that for her family to accept you, then you need to marry in her culture. This will mean a multi-day celebration of marriage with all of her extended family. Her family will demand it, or will be dishonored. When my sister got married in 2010, my parents paid for everything, because at the time, we were well off. My parents paid for the wedding, my sister got cash from their guests, and my parents gifted her an additional check to pay off the remaining expenses on her credit card. Overall, everything was probably valued at $55,000 for my sister's wedding. Me and my husband just got married this year. It took us about 4 years to save up and pay for our own $32,000 wedding. We had a wedding at my parents' house and received a lot of gifts and cash from our friends and family. When it was all over, my parents only gifted me half the amount of cash that they gifted my sister and her husband. I asked them why, and tried negotiating with them to make it equal. But they said there's not much more they could do because they aren't in the same position today as they were back then. I feel slighted because I'm the independent child that constantly does as she is supposed to. I finished college, got my master's degree, paid for school by myself, bought my own cars and house. My sister still lives with them, is divorced. They provide her with childcare and supplement her entire lifestyle. Am I the a-hole for asking for equality in how they treat me versus how they spoiled my sister? Or should I just let it go since I'm succeeding in life? You're the a-hole. You admit their financial circumstances have changed. What do you want them to do? Create cash out of thin air? God, I hate this. Spend tens of thousands of dollars on wedding scrap. It just breeds resentment. Save your money and invest it. Or spend it on a house, travel, education, anything that will yield lifetime benefits. You're the a-hole. Your parents don't have the money. It's that simple. The fact that you went straight for negotiation instead of thanking them. Wowee. Your sister's having a hard time, and your parents are supporting her. Count yourself lucky that you don't need this level of help. Holy hell, you're the a-hole. Your parents gifted you thousands of dollars, and you tried to negotiate for more? Damn, I feel bad for your parents.